Growth Overview and Scrutiny Committee today, Monday, 24th of November. We'll start with item 1 on the agenda, and that is a membership update to the committee. I'd like to welcome Councillor Denise Nicholson to the committee, who's replacing Councillor Lambert. I hope you find this committee interesting and informative. Welcome to the committee. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for any. No apologies for attendance. Item 3 is minutes of the last meeting. If we can confirm that those minutes are accurate, please. Thank you. Item 4, disclosure of members' interest. Does any member have anything that they need to disclose with regards to today's agenda, which they haven't previously? No. Nothing? Okay, thank you. So we'll move forward to item 5, which is forward plan of cabinet decisions.
Yeah, this is the full plan of cabinet decisions and decisions to be made. It's very self-explanatory, but if no have any questions, we have to start.
Councillor Robinson.
Right, the very last one, page 17, is about the Hexham former fire station site. Now, I believe we've got an extraordinary meeting next week about that.
Correct.
Is there any point in having that meeting if that decision's cast in stone? I mean, why are we having the meeting next week?
It's been called in.
Yes, but it says here it's not for sale. It's quite categorical.
Councillor Oliver.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So I mean, the decision was, you're quite right, the fire station has never been for sale.
Yeah.
In fact, I inquired about it on behalf of a resident in my ward in June 23 and was told that. And I think when the planning application to demolish the building to make way for the new vehicle workshop that's needed in the west went in, that created some consternation amongst local councillors. And that has sort of developed into obviously quite a big. There was a big event on the seal on Sunday in Hexham, and so the cabinet, in a sense, didn't make a decision. It sort of made a decision not to do something because the decision, back in 2021, there was £7 or £8 million in the budget for developing a Hexham depot, and that plan got paused whilst waiting for more detail on recycling requirements and so on. And we've got all of that now, so we do need to get on with expanding workshop facilities. And but the decision of the cabinet was to, after analysing it, and the Regen team did quite a detailed study, was to let basically repeat to Sir Anthony Gormley and his foundation that yes, we're standing by the original decision that it isn't for sale. That decision has been called in, so the sort of council procedure rules allow it to be challenged, and so we will appear before you next week to justify the decision we've made. And then you may, as a committee, suggest that we take another look at it, or you may agree with us, or who knows what will happen. But we'll just try and make the best case we possibly can for the decision that we made a few weeks ago, and explain how that decision was arrived at and what data was used and the workings behind some of the figures that. And also tell you about some of the things that we're doing with the Gormley Foundation to try and find another site and work on other things. So you're quite right. A decision has been made, but it's not impossible to reverse a decision, and we will discuss it in a great deal of detail with you all next week. And so we're busy preparing for that now.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Call-in is a prescribed process. Hasn't been done for a long time. And 5 years since the last one. Well, here's a call-in procedure, and we'll follow it next week. Okay.
Just wanted to be clear what was on the table, Chair.
No problem. Anything else on item 5? Happy to move on. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I think I'm on the right report. Well-being, page 37. It's saying following a soft market testing exercise conducted in August 2024, formal tender exercise for occupational health
This
services.
next, we're not on that.
That's the next one.
Yes. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the annual workforce report. I'll ask Sarah. Nick, you want to go on that?
Yes, so I'll basically do a quick counter through the report, if that's okay, Chair, and then I'll ask Sarah if there's anything she'd like to add, and then we'll try and field all of your questions. So this is an annual report, and obviously I've sat on this committee for the last few years, and it gets better and better every year, the detail in the report. And I just have sort of a few key introductory points. We have 5,400 staff in the council, excluding schools. So we are a large employer. And interestingly, somebody told me recently that 80% of those staff actually live in the county. So as well as staff working here, they are also residents and users of council services. One of the key things that sort of jumped out at me is that 15% of those staff are due to retire in the next 3 years, and that rises to almost half of the current workforce retiring in the next 10, 15 years. So I think a lot of the work that's outlined in the report is really important. I think you just keep those sort of facts at the back of your mind. And also, there's been a national report published in recent weeks by Sir Charlie Mayfield called Keep Britain Working Report, which is sort of trying to address some of the issues that are actually that the council, like every other large employer in the land, are trying to deal with. And Councillor Nicholson mentions occupational health. We'll come on to that in a second. There are a lot of positives in this report. Sarah and her team and the whole sort of executive team of the council are doing some very good work. There's a lot of change happening in Northumberland County Council at the moment. We've got the BEST programme. There's effectively a modernisation programme going on fairly intensively right across the council. All services are impacted. But I'll pick out a few things that sort of jumped out at me in the report. The staff bank, I think, is a really good initiative, and that's sort of really sort of gathered momentum in recent years. There's a sort of talent pool of staff that can be drawn on to cover shortages or deal with spikes in demand. There's also that also reduces agency spend, which is often very expensive. There's been a big effort to improve recruitment and speed it up. And the sort of introduction of a staffing panel. There's a lot of work going on in learning and development to improve the skills of staff, and the Living Leader programme is a good example of that, where staff with leadership potential are being trained how to lead and manage, which is a really positive thing. So we're sort of looking at the leaders of the future in the council. There's a lot of focus on apprenticeships, which I think is really, really important. And I think we've won awards as a council for our use of apprenticeships. We use the full levy, so none of the money that we get for apprenticeships gets left unspent. There's been a new impact assessment process that takes into account the sort of needs of staff as well. So I think that's a really good thing when changes in policy are being made. There are plans to develop improved mental health support. There's been a big exercise recently, which I'm sure Sarah will be able to tell us a little bit more about in terms of occupational health, which will help to improve the sort of well-being of our staff, but also will help to bring down sickness levels as well. And then there's been a big focus on career pathways as well. So young people coming into the organisation can see a clear career pathway through the organisation. And certainly, just anecdotally, my experience with the customer service team is we get some great people come in, they get recruited, they see all the other wonderful things the council are doing, and then they leave that team and go and join another service, which makes it quite challenging for the customer service team to keep them staff, but they're not losing them outside the organisation. A lot of the staff are actually going to other places within the organisation. So that's sort of a few of the key good points. There are, of course, some challenges, and it would be wrong to sort of hide from those challenges. We do have an ageing workforce. We're an ageing workforce in an ageing county, actually. And, you know, the average age of residents in Northumberland is ageing, and so succession planning is really, really important, and developing those sort of future talent pools is really important, and the career pathways. Staff retention can be a problem in, you know, it has improved, but it's certainly a problem in certain areas. Anecdotally, I think if you talk to staff in local services, recruiting and retaining HGV drivers, for example, where there's a lot of competition with the private sector, is quite tricky. I think the same probably applies in planning as well, where the private sector and the planning inspectorate and others have sort of taken some really good staff. However, what we offer as a council is a whole package. So often there might be a disparity in the baseline wage, but actually the council's package in terms of pensions and other benefits, salary sacrifice opportunities and things like that is pretty comprehensive. There are a lot of cultural difficulties or challenges. Actually, it's not challenges. It's at the moment we've got the best programme, and there's a lot of change happening. And I think in any organisation that experiences change, it does lead to a certain amount of disruption and uncertainty. And the team are doing a really good job of reassuring people, and people are responding very positively to those changes. We no doubt there will be questions about sickness absence, and there's a lot of work going on to address that. Sickness absence has risen quite dramatically, and that was part of the one of the things that sort of discussed in the Mayfield report, as well as people actually not working at all. But the rise in Northumberland has been lower than the average rise across the country, and that average rise is a calculation based on both public and private sector. So, you know, we have actually had a slower rise than others, and there's some really good work going on to try and reduce sickness absence and support staff where needed. There's also better reporting, management tools, return to work interviews and things like that, and then occupational health support. There may be discussions around working from home. I think the council sees working from home as in many instances as a real positive, and I think individuals can really sort of benefit from having some flexibility where appropriate to be able to work from home. We've got to remember we have a very wide geography. We're often competing for staff with metropolitan just areas, both public and private sector. And if you're somebody working for the council that's in Berwick, it might be quite tricky to get to Allendale and that sort of thing. So, or if you're getting from Berwick to County Hall, or from Holtwhistle to County Hall, it's a long way. So time spent in a car getting here could be better spent actually doing some work. And so I think that, no doubt there'll be a bit of a discussion around that. And the council takes its sort of staff survey very seriously, is already very keen to understand what staff think of working here, and I think we are seen generally as a positive, good employer. So that sort of in a nutshell are the key things I picked out, both good and bad. I don't really want to.
Nothing really.
No. But we're both very happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions?
Yes, I've got a few actually, but the first one was noticing the percentage of people that were due to retire. Do you have any idea what departments or what job levels that's going to hit most, and have we got any planning in place for that? Linked on to that is the voluntary exit scheme. Is there an update on that? Is it in place now, and has it Is it working?
Yeah.
How many people have took it up? And the occupational health thing was another one, but that's already been raised. So, and the other one, of course, is the absence, and it does rise every year on year. So I don't know what. I know we've got good things in place, and I'm noticing on this one this year that the place and regen department has actually dropped. So what's happening in that, and can we copy that into other departments, sort of thing? And then I do just need a bit of clarification on page 47, because I think I've got my duck head on. Whistleblowing, paragraph 8.254. Excuse me, but I can't read this little writing. With whistleblowing cases recording the largest reduction over the 2 reporting periods. But the tables underneath, the 1st of July to the 31st of August 25, that's 15, and the year before there's 3.
Page was that again?
Yeah, the narrative doesn't match the.
No.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering which one's right.
Yeah.
Is there a reduction or an increase in whistleblowing?
I can't offer an explanation. Can I come back to you on that? I wonder whether those tables are being mixed up.
And the other thing on that table is the increase in disciplinary. I wonder if there's a particular reason behind that.
I mean, I can respond to that now. We have tried to analyse as to what might be going on there, and unfortunately, there's no sort of correlation with the data. It is just a case of there's just been fewer disciplinary cases forthcoming, which it is a good thing.
Yeah.
More active management, I would suggest it is poor behaviour.
Sorry, did you say fewer disciplinary?
There's more.
Because there's more.
More.
Yeah, so more, yeah. We discussed this when we met, didn't we?
We did.
There is a more proactive approach going on to dealing with, management at all levels are sort of being assisted to deal with any disciplinary issues, and there's the approach is to try and deal with things as early as possible before they become more serious, which I think is a really good positive thing to do, so that people that aren't, that need a disciplinary approach are getting it as early as possible before it gets out of hand. Can I just pick up on a few of the points you raised, and then Sarah can give a bit more detail on the retirement side of things. I don't really have the detail in terms of if there are any particular departments more affected than others, but on the voluntary redundancy, I'm not sure of the exact figures, but I am told that it's been quite a successful process in terms of because as we go through the best.
I'm talking about voluntary exit rather than voluntary redundancy.
Exit. Well, it's called Mars. It's sort of the key word is voluntary though. It's and so people are being offered the opportunity of their own free will to leave, and depending on length of service and etc. There'll be sort of different entitlements to different sort of packages. As an administration, it's our determination to, as the sort of workforce reduces with all of the modernisation that's going on, to do as much of that as possible using voluntary means. And I'm told that the phase that we're in at the moment has been very successful, and that's being worked through at the moment. So the individual applications are being considered, and will be sort of accepted where appropriate. So it has been a positive thing, and if we can make these changes in a voluntary way, that's obviously much preferable to having to do something in a complex.
I mean, I sat on the committee that was brought forward to, I can't remember if it was here, but It was just, I wondered about the numbers behind it at the
Yeah.
minute, if we can have some.
Oh, you've got the data.
That's it.
Yeah.
So we call voluntary exit scheme as the umbrella term, and sitting below that is voluntary redundancy and Mars. A voluntary redundancy is the actual removal of a post. It will no longer exist in the future. Mars payments can be made to individuals who wish to leave the organisation, but by leaving their role, it would generate an opportunity for somebody who might be displaced through a compulsory process elsewhere in the organisation through the implementation of BEST. So in total, we have the scheme open for a time-limited period, directly mapping across to our Wave 1 implementation, which will, as you'll be aware, will be coming on stream sort of beginning of April next year. So that affects all of our enabling services. So all of our applications that we received were viewed through the lens of, would this generate an opportunity or make a necessary reduction in that Wave 1 pool, if you like. So we might have looked at an application and said, maybe not now, but at some point in the future, at a more appropriate time. Maybe we're going through Wave 2 and Wave 3. In total, for this particular exercise, we received 294 expressions of interest. Now, they weren't, those individuals were under no obligation to leave, and likewise, we were under no obligation to grant those applications. We've analysed all of those, and we've been able to agree to voluntary redundancy. So in other words, we've made reductions to the workforce on a voluntary basis, 27 those, and we've managed to make 28 Mars offers. So in other words, generating an opportunity, so 28 opportunities have been generated through the release of people on a voluntary basis. So it's been quite a successful scheme.
Sarah, could you give a little bit more detail on the occupational health and where that's at?
Certainly. So I don't know whether Councillor Nicholson had a specific question. I just want to make sure my response addresses your.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. On first of all, why are we moving from the NHS to, tendered it out, for a private company? Is there a saving? If so, what is the saving? And regarding the 2P, how have you managed to reduce that 2P list? And where are you 2Ping from?
I'll talk in general terms about occupational health contract, the re-tendering exercise that has taken place, and I'll try and cover off those points in my response. So we have, since 2016, had an arrangement with Northumbria. Northumbria provide occupational health services to their own staff, but have also branched out to provide services to us. Now, they are very much set up to service their own requirements and needs. They're not operating on a commercial basis. They don't deliver services to anybody else. And that has presented somewhat of a challenge because it's been very difficult, I think, to effect good contract management and sort of really drive the performance levels that we need, which is one of the main reasons why we're going to a private provider where we can have that commercial contract arrangement. We can ensure that performance levels are met, because what Northumbria have attempted to do is service our requirements within their existing resource levels. Their resource levels haven't necessarily mapped to meet our demand, and that has resulted in extremely long waiting times for really in-demand services like mental health. So we're talking about months. Whereas when we've explored waiting times with potential new providers, we're talking about matters of days, up to 1 to 2 weeks to get somebody into seen for the first. Now that severely impacts our ability to manage long-term absences linked to mental health, which we know are our major cause of absence and therefore cost. So that's the main driver for wanting to explore a different arrangement with a private provider. In terms of savings, the contract cost is probably going to cost us marginally more, but in terms of the actual impact that service will deliver in our ability to be able to actually manage people back to work quicker and more effectively and keep people at work, so they're not waiting months on end for an appointment to see a psychiatrist, will hopefully deliver savings in terms of sickness absence related costs. So it's an indirect saving rather than a direct saving. Sorry, remind me of your question regarding
The 2P on that, when tender first went out, the 2P, the cost of the 2P was high, but then you've managed, on the second paragraph, it said you've managed to reduce that 2P. So how did you manage to reduce that 2P, and where are these staff coming from?
Okay, so the 2P would be between the existing Northumbria service and the new provider, whoever they might be, and I'll give you an update as to where we're at in that tendering process in a moment. Because Northumbria don't operate on a commercial basis, I think it was really hard to get a grip on which staff were in scope for that 2P. So I think we got a really long list. It's very hard to push back on that, and despite our best efforts, we did push back and say, you know, why have we got, I don't know, for example, 3 physiotherapists assigned to this when we're probably only using one physiotherapist's worth of provision. Through that challenge between the 2 attempted 2P tendering exercises, that list did reduce, which means it's more appealing for a private provider because they're not going to take on that liability and associated staff costs with that high number of 2P staff. I think over the course of time towards the new contract date, I think that 2P list will probably reduce even further, because I think it's likely that those individuals who are currently on NHS terms and conditions may wish to stay on their NHS terms and conditions and may voluntarily move elsewhere within Northumbria before the transfer deadline, and which is likely to be the 1st of April 2026. Answer your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Just before bringing Councillor Austin, so did you say when it was under NHS, was there no charge or just a lower charge?
I don't know how able I am to share the contract value because it could be potentially commercially sensitive. There is a contract cost. It is a significant contract cost. We're looking at a marginal increase in the contract cost to move to it, based on what we know in terms of where we're at in the tender exercise.
So say there's one thing, you know, saving money, but if you don't get the service, what's the point of saving money?
Precisely, and if it will bring savings in the wider sort of scope
in the long term,
because actually if you've managed to reduce
more
that to stay at work and reduce costs of agency staff to replace staff off sick, etc., then there's potentially a really good
like getting cheap bus fares, but bus for sure. Yeah, Councillor Austin. You know.
Thank you very much. A couple of easy ones really to start with. We're mentioning that you've mentioned that we're going to lose a considerable number of our workforce over the next few years through retirement and so forth. Yeah, further on in the report, we find out that the average time for recruitment is 43 days, which I think is pretty good. Okay, but then we also have at the same time a voluntary exit scheme. So we have a voluntary exit scheme. So do we have a problem with retirement or not? That's one minor question. Another one, this should be an easy one. We've got ethnicity figures for who's employed by the council, which I have no problem with. But then we're told that there's 5.3%, I think it is, of people with a disability, but we have no county-wide figures. Is that 5.3 a good value, or is it not a good value? We have no data to work with. That should hopefully be a simple one. We notice also we have a gender pay gap. Is this pay gap going to continue in the future? Might we have a Birmingham type problem in the future? There seems to be no mention on that one. There's no part in here where we have union engagement mentioned as part of dealing with staff. Possibly if we had a very positive relationship with unions, we might actually have less in the way of staff sickness and so forth, or having policies which are driven by the union, which they can then support. And I think that's probably it. I'll start with
I'll have a stab at some of those, and then you just put Island behind me and give a bit more detail. That's okay. On the retirement issue, I think the retirement is the average age in the workforce is pretty high, and so that is going to cause a problem in the future. So, but when you consider it in the context of Mars and voluntary redundancy and organisational reorganisation and so on, you've got a sort of macro picture of an ageing workforce, but you've got a micro picture of individual requirements in different departments changing. So the trick will be to make sure that in the departments where we do have sort of key people who are approaching retirement age, that we identify and train their replacements, so that service doesn't sort of, the wheels don't fall off at some point in the future, whilst using the other mechanisms, and retirement will be one of those tools. So in terms of, there will be opportunities to reduce the size of the workforce in areas where we can, and we want to do that by using retirement, because people will just naturally retire and they won't get replaced. But in other cases, it will be absolutely essential to replace it. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a sort of, very detailed answer, but I suppose the broad answer is it will depend on individual departments. But the overall picture is one that we do need to address of an ageing workforce. In terms of I don't have an answer to the disability wider figure. Sarah, do you?
We don't. I mean, we don't have county-wide data. We can only comment on our own internal data, and that very much relies upon individuals self-reporting. And we've tried to encourage the level of self-reporting over the previous year because we had quite a low return. There may be sort of cultural issues at play there in terms of why people don't feel able to disclose that level of personal detail, but we have worked hard on that, particularly focusing on our senior leadership team to act as role models to the organisation and to demonstrate that it's safe to disclose this information. It's treated with the utmost confidentiality, and obviously the more information we have about the workforce, the more we can sort of build our policies and approach in order to address their specific needs.
On the gender pay gap, I mean, I'll let Sarah give a bit more detail about what that figure means. But I'm pretty sure that we don't have a Birmingham type roster. I think as the portfolio for finance and HR, I would know about it if we did, but I'm fairly certain we don't. But can you give a bit more detail on the?
Certainly, I think there's two separate issues there. So the Birmingham situation was born out of sort of equal pay risk, and how much liability Birmingham had generated by there being disparity in terms of how men and women were paid differently. Our gender pay gap is actually a very healthy gender pay gap. There is actually, I think women are slightly more favourably paid than men on average, and that's bucking the national trend. So I'd say
Good for us.
It is good for us because it would suggest that we have achieved parity at the very least between men and women, whereas traditionally women have been more underpaid than men. We are on the case with regards to equal pay. We conduct audits in relation to how we implement our job evaluation approach. We will be imminently reviewing how we implement job evaluation, and we're actually currently considering a new tool in order to evaluate which would further eradicate any future equal pay risk.
And on the point of union engagement, I'll let Sarah give a little bit more detail, but when I did this role a few years ago, I was involved in a couple of the sort of union panels, and there were various different sort of touch points with the unions, and obviously whenever there's change going on, there's a lot of consultation with unions, but Sarah, perhaps you could give a little more detail.
Yeah, quite, and actually in the reporting period, it's not a feature of the report, but I'm pleased to be able to report now. We managed to revise our trade union partnership agreement, which is a mutual commitment to one another to work together positively, collaboratively, consistently, and create some sort of parameters and commitments in terms of how we engage with our trade unions and how we work together in order to be able to come with mutually agreeable as far as possible situations. And we agreed that with our branch representatives, and all parties, including the leader of the council, signed up to that. And I have to say, we do have positive working relations. I mean, obviously there are challenging times.
So it's not reported, that's all.
Quite. That's not an intentional omission. It's just a genuine omission, and I can report when we do have positive.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Taylor.
Just a couple. First one is about returning to the office. the government directive now on civil servants and sort of like wider government departments is 60% of the time in the office.
Yeah.
Are we going along with that? Because what you said before is obviously we've got to take into consideration the geography of the county and where people travel from. Are we going in line with that? Are we going against that?
Yes, well, this is something that I'm sort of in preparing for this meeting. I was wanted to have a discussion about and make sure that I understood it. And obviously, the landscape has changed since COVID, and there is a lot more working from home. And we've discussed it as a cabinet, and one of my cabinet colleagues knows somebody who works for the council that does live in Alnwick, and she saves a lot of time, and she's probably doing 2 hours a day more work than she was previously. So there will be good examples and bad examples, of course. But I think the point is around trying to make us a competitive employer and offering flexibility where flexibility won't impact on somebody's ability to do the job. And I think that, and a lot of the services, and particularly with the investment that's been sort of happening, and it was continuing to happen in better IT, particularly with better broadband in most of the county now than we used to have. I think it is a lot easier for people to work remotely and effectively. But I'm very conscious that particularly young people are given the opportunity to socialise, to learn from their colleagues, and work is about delivering work. It's also it's a significant part of your sort of existence, and it's really important to enjoy your work and to get some satisfaction from it. So, but in my discussions with Sarah, it's quite clear that the council have all of those principles in mind, and are working really hard to make sure that we get that balance right. Is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I think another thing that I would say in terms of our approach is through allowing hybrid working in a non-prescriptive way, so allowing services to agree with their people what works best for them as individuals, but also ensures consistent service delivery, allows people to collaborate, whether that be through digitally or meeting in person. One of the major benefits, apart from our geographical challenges and attracting people into Northumberland to work, and what I would say is that hybrid working is now an expectation. It's not a new or novel concept anymore. Particularly the younger generation would expect there to be hybrid working as a basic standard for the employee package. The other thing that's enabled is significant estate savings. We wouldn't have been able to make the reductions to our estate that we've been able to make had we not allowed people to do some of their time working from home, and they are significant savings. So I think we've got a work smart. I'm not going to call it initiative, but it's a long-standing thing. It was started as an initiative. It's now integrated and embedded, and will be further embedded. We have a set of work smart principles that services and individuals are expected to adhere to around sort of what collaboration looks like, how much time will be spent away from home, but we're not going down the prescriptive route. And the LGA and MHCLG have all recommended that local authorities should be allowed the discretion to what works best for them. And if you consider Northumberland and its uniqueness in terms of the environment of Northumberland, that non-prescriptive approach is working for us.
Good. Glad to hear it.
I think
Sorry, I've just got one.
I think I should get a job with the local authority because I'm covered under the 60% where I work.
Me too.
And the annoying thing is, at home, I'm logged on at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And avoiding the hassles of the transport and getting clogged up, etc. And I understand that there are people who need to be in the office, or that's how they work, and there's a preference there. But there's a lot of distractions in the office, and getting in the office to then log onto a computer and carry on video calls, which is what you do at home, but with lots of distractions. And it does frustrate me when you get the public who say, get back to work, and trust me, work longer hours at home than I do in the office, with having to struggle to get to and from the office, and all the problems.
You tend to do more at home. You
Much,
tend to get more productive at home
much more.
than you are when you're actually having to travel into the office.
But then you arrange the face-to-face stuff on the time that you do, you are in the office. So,
Yeah.
anyway, sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Sorry.
Other question that I've got is on page 35. at 5.2.3 on the staff survey indicators. I'm not sure if this is like a wrong number or where you've got increased employee net promoter score is a metric that measures how likely employees are to recommend the council as an employer. So 2024, it was a plus 2.47.
Yeah.
2025, it's a minus 10.34.
Yeah.
That's it. Hell of a drop.
It looks, sorry.
It does.
Yeah, no, well, I think we did discuss this.
Yeah.
There's one of the reasons more people responding, I think, so, you know, people, but anyway, I'll let Sarah.
I think we need to consider those figures with care. The ENPS was a tool that was originally designed, I think, for customer satisfaction. Now, whether or not it actually is fit for our purpose, we're currently looking at now. It's something that we've tracked from year to year. This is the second annual workforce report that the committee will have seen, which includes it. And whilst that looks extreme in ENPS terms, it's not that extreme. And I think that the context, and I can provide information in terms of the ranges as to what you would expect to see. What I would say is that where we are at currently in terms of our transformation journey, staff do feel anxious. They feel destabilised by the current situation. That is very much a snapshot in time. That will very much depend upon how those people were feeling on the day that question was answered. What I think is more important, that we haven't got the analysis in the report because it wasn't available, and it's still not available, unfortunately, is when we asked about ENPS scores, when we asked that question which gave rise to the ENPS score, we also this time offered people the opportunity to enter some free text. So a little bit of qualitative context, I think, is really important. So why did you give that score? Because we've got the what, but we haven't got the why there. So I think what I would like to, before we become overly concerned about long-term cultural damage that might indicate, I would like to understand the context. But I would say, please don't be alarmed at that. It's not as bad as it actually looks.
It's just that at the bottom, where you've got 87.2% would recommend NCC as a good employer.
Yeah.
So that kind of contradicts what you've got at the top.
I think all of the other metrics are positive, and that's the one that isn't, and it's probably a bit of an anomaly in that respect. And if you've got 91.5% of people leaving the council saying they enjoyed working here, maybe question why they've then left, but they might retire or whatever. But it is, the other. So I think overall it's a positive experience, and that one metric is just about in line with everything else.
Councillor Beale.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor has asked my first question. On that, though, on the other exit surveys and new starter surveys, you've got a number, how many people complete the survey. On the staff survey, you haven't got figures of how many. And it really, when you look at the figures, it depends if your glass is half full or glass is half empty. With the new the one below that, about I am well supported by a line manager, is 15%. So that's really nearly 1,000 or 700-800 people aren't happy with the support they're getting from the line manager. First of all, what's being done about that? And are you happy with 85%? And again, going to what Nick's just said there about the exit survey, you still have 45% who wouldn't apply if a suitable post was advertised, and 15% wouldn't recommend NCC as a good employer. So really, this is not my profession, so I don't know whether these figures are, it's probably one for Sarah to answer, whether you're happy with these figures, and especially on the line manager where 15%, which is a large number, don't think they're being supported by their line manager. That has to be worrying.
Yeah.
Pick that up first. What I would say, agree, and the 85% is indicative of people who agree or strongly agree. It's not people who, because on a scale of 1 to 5, you might have people who feel fairly indifferent, who just answered 3, and I couldn't give you the proportion of respondents that answered that. It isn't necessarily the case that 15% fundamentally disagree and that they don't have a good relationship with their line manager. So I would caveat that particular result. You also asked a question about staff survey in terms of response rate.
Yes.
So we have actually experienced an increased response rate. So in 2024, our response rate was 54.4%. And in our most recent survey, we did up that to 56.3%, so a slight increase. And we did that through trying to engage our harder to reach populations. So, for example, our firefighter workforce, our more remote depot-based workforce who traditionally aren't sitting in front of a PC, who can't. It's much harder for them to just ping a survey response through. So we actually actively engage them through visiting sites when and where they were available in order to engage them more fully. So we've had a higher response rate in those particular areas, which has boosted our overall response rate.
Just one comment on that. A lot of these figures, I think we're all slightly confused with. Could I suggest that for the next report that there's a bit more detail on these percentages, because you can look at them 2 or 3 different ways.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's and also the
percentages can be misleading, because if you've got 50%, it could mean 1 for and 1 against. That's 50%, but you don't know how many behind it. It could be 1,000 or it could be 2.
yes, correct.
That's really percentages, no quantities always behind it. So, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a general point, I've been on the other side of these staff surveys. And I know the type of people that tend to fill them in, the type of people that don't fill them in. And your point about every time there's been a negative, you've said, don't take that as gospel. We're going to have a look at that. Well, I take the whole lot like that then. Because unless you can justify the negatives, I'm not going to take positive. Now, that's just a general point.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask about page 47 again, disciplinary and whistleblowing. Now, if we're going to have, if you're suggesting whistleblowing or whatever, then can we have it sent out to us?
Yeah.
When you get it fixed? Then Nick's explanation about the discipline, I just don't think I understand that at all.
No, that's great.
You're tackling it earlier and it's produced a 3rd rise in disciplinary, but so I don't understand that bit, Nick. My main question, I suppose, I've got a few smaller ones. Working from home, the biggest problem I've had from people is, officers is the same, they haven't got the information to answer my question. They need to be back in the office to access whatever they need to access to answer my query, question, whatever. So it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it does happen. Voluntary leaving, voluntary redundancies, whatever you want to call it, golden handshakes, whatever it is. Do we know what departments? Is there any departments particularly affected by these? I think you said up to 50. 20 odd and 20 odd or something, departures. But my main question is, in the best career pathways, and you spoke about this before. Now, what you're suggesting Best is doing is producing a bank of people who can go and do different jobs, and you want the flexibility of that. But you're talking about career pathways. I'm of an age where you grew up and you specialised, and that was the career pathway you took. What you seem to be saying is we need people who are multi-skillful, multi-functional. So are we training that into these career pathways? So you aren't just, I don't know what the colloquialisms are for the type of jobs you're talking about, but you're qualified in X. So that's where you go X, and you want people qualified in the full alphabet. So I would take that into account on career pathway.
Can I just come back to you? So on the first point you made about disciplinary, I think to try and explain that a bit more as I understand it. So people managing people within the organisation are I think now better supported to deal with issues and encouraged to deal with issues. So if they have a potential disciplinary issue within their department, then they are encouraged to deal with it earlier. and address it and not let things sort of slip. So I think that we would probably all agree in terms of representing our residents that that's really important. That the good staff are looked after really well, and staff that aren't performing well are challenged on that. And I think that probably explains that statistic, the fact that there is more challenge now, and the managers are being supported to deal with and encouraged to deal with those things. So I think that sort of explains it. And whilst that's happening, you are inevitably bound to have some sort of spike, and then hopefully in the long term that will level off, and we'll have fewer issues, a happier, more motivated workforce, because there's nothing worse. We've probably all experienced it when you're working in a job and someone near you is not really pulling their weight, and you're working really hard. It's quite demoralising. So I think that's a sort of really important approach.
So what you're saying is that the managers are identifying and challenging
people that that need disciplinary.
and that's why there's been.
Yeah. I think is that a fair summary, Sarah?
And I think that we have had particular hotspots in the past years, and I think that one case generates future cases. So, for example, you might have a disciplinary case which might result in counter grievances or multiple counter grievances. They tend to sort of grow arms and legs, and we know that we've had hotspots that we're actively working with at the moment in terms of remedial, putting situations back together again, putting those interventions in place to ensure that it's not necessarily going to be the case that perpetuates on into the future. We have tried to analyse and see whether there was any particular themes as to why the disciplinary rates were the way that they were, and there was nothing really that was particularly apparent, other than knowing that we have got those hotspot areas where we're putting targeted intervention in place.
On the point about access to information and people working from home, it's hard to sort of deal with that on a generic level. I mean, hopefully what you'll see over time is an improvement. We are out in procurement at the moment for the new CRM system, as we've discussed previously, and there's a lot of investment going in and making systems talk to each other and give people remote access to things like that. There's a rationalisation of systems going on, so fewer different IT apps or programs or systems, and it being much more centralised. So hopefully you'll see that improve. But in the meantime, if you've got specific instances, do let me know, because it may be that there's a sort of short-term fix for it or whatever. And I've got sort of IT and digitisation within my portfolio as well. So I am be quite keen to sort of understand as it happens. Just ping me an email, and but hopefully the general trend will be positive improvements. On the voluntary leaving by department and the career pathways, I'll defer to Sarah on that, if that's okay.
Right. What I would say with regards to the availability of information, one of the key concepts of Best Way 1 is an employee hub. So in other words, we're building a digital platform for individuals to be able to find the information they need when they need it. So and allow, I guess, more self-service to take pressure off enabling functions specifically. So it's just building that kind of digital capability. So there is less need for people to be in the office around colleagues to get to the answers that they need.
You've got to have that, haven't you?
We do, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but it is all intended outcomes for Wave 1. We're building that employee hub alongside the staffing changes that we will be making. On the subject of the best career pathways, so we've done a lot of work around job architecture, because what we did have was sort of a fairly, it's an evolved situation. It's happened all quite organically, quite a chaotic, disparate distribution of job descriptions and roles across the organisation. We don't know where our skills and capabilities currently sit. We've got a much better line of sight on that now. What that has allowed us to do for individuals and for us in terms of our succession planning and our future talent pipelines is know where our skills and capabilities are. We know where we need them, and allow people to track through and the service to visualise where their future skills and capabilities might come from. So you described a very traditional career pathway, which was very linear. start as an apprentice in this area, I'll go up through the ranks and I end up a fully qualified X. What we're now able to do is identify much clearer what those steps within that linear careers pathway might be, but might also identify where people might be able to jump across onto different career pathways, having a better awareness of what collective skills and capabilities sit within career pathways. So you've got more of a potential for a squiggly line career rather than that linear career. It just opens up a whole new world of possibilities for individuals and services. Multi-skilling probably is one of the objectives. And that's, I think, to create better efficiency so we can deploy people where we need them and be a much more agile workforce rather than people being siloed and quite blinkered in terms of what their career possibilities might be and in terms of services, how they actually sort of meet demand. You know, we can pull skills and capabilities from across the organisation in a way that we weren't able to do because we didn't know where those skills and capabilities sit.
I understand that. I mean, in my old job, it started off as a mechanic. You then had to be an electrician. And when I ended up, you had to have an electronics qualification as well, just to do that. So I understand that. I still want to know about where the people are that's leaving.
Yeah.
And whether that's a morale issue within the organisation. You know, if it's one particular department, then I would suggest we need to ask the people why they're doing it.
Yeah.
So I think there's two questions in there. Is where are we getting expressions of interest, which would suggest that people want to leave, where we're actually releasing people. So where we're finding in particular people want to leave is not necessarily department based. It's more a demographic around age.
Right.
So there is a provision in the local government pension scheme that allows people over the age of 55, if they leave on a voluntary basis, not only receive a redundancy payment or a payment based on redundancy payment, but also access their pension in an unreduced way. So obviously it's quite an incentive for them to leave after the age of 55. Unfortunately, we as the local government pension scheme would have to take the strain costs. So whilst it might be very attractive for them, it's very expensive for us. So I think there's a lot of speculative applications being made within that particular demographic that because of the cost, unfortunately, we haven't been able to say yes to. In some cases we will, but obviously that will be on a cost assessed basis. It has to be in the best interest of the council to release those individuals. But I think what you've got, your inkling that there might be indicative of, you know, particular unrest or dissatisfaction, I don't think that's necessarily the case. In terms of who we've agreed to release, it has to be cost effective for the council. It has to, and certainly in the cases of Mars, generate an opportunity for people who are likely to be displaced in that wave one of activity. And the VRs that we release, the voluntary redundancies where we're actually deleting the roles, have to be linked to our organisational design. In other words, we would be making reductions in those areas anyway. We'd rather do it on a voluntary basis than a compulsory basis.
Yeah.
Right, so I've got Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Austin and Councillor Dunn. I think we'll then draw this item. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, regarding going back to the working from home, I'm just getting a little bit confused because you're saying hybrid, you're saying working from home. Do we have both scenarios within the council? And if we do, on the hybrid side, what's your average weekly, you know, in the office days, number of office days? And when we go back to the amount of people that are leaving, have you figures whether they're permanently at work, at base, or whether they're hybrid, or whether they're working?
Are you okay to take that one? Level of detail, I don't.
I think we're probably speaking, it's semantics. When we talk about working from home, we do not have anybody who's currently working 100% from home, unless there are very, very specific and rare examples for them to do that. And that might be around reasonable adjustments for disability, but they absolutely are in the minority. Most individuals where the work is conducive to some level of working from home, it's a hybrid arrangement. We don't have enterprise level figures for that because it's very much on a service basis. It's agreed with the service as to how conducive that role is to work from home, how much estate's available for people to be able to come in and actually work from the office as opposed to working from home. We encourage people to have, Councillor Swinburne described it earlier, presence with purpose. So if you do need to be in for a meeting, you try and structure your day around those meetings. Otherwise, you find that people are just as productive, if not more productive, working from home.
It's just because in the past, over 20 years, I've done hybrid work. But, you know, it was, I get the point, you know, that, sorry, name on the end.
Councillor Robinson.
Right, okay, I get the point Councillor Robinson's making about, you know, when they're at home and they're not able to get certain answers, you know, because they're not in the office. I found that the hybrid structure worked very well if you did have a set number of days that you were in the office and at home, you know, an average, that those figures that I'm talking about, purely because, yes, you are right, over 20 years of working hybrid, I always found that when I needed another colleague to help me and assist me with a certain answer to some type of work or go on with type of work, that colleague would be very, very difficult to contact, especially the colleagues that worked in the office all of the time. It was easier for them to be busier and not answer my calls than it would be if I was in the office and I was walking into their office. And I found that, and the offices I worked in were many miles away. I was 300, 400 miles. So I was flying every week down to the office. So that's why I was asking about the balance of, do you have, you know, I know you're saying it's department based, but in my view, there should always be some days based, you know, on a weekly basis, just to make sure that they make that communication link, because it is very difficult to make it from home.
And some services will operate like that. Some services will say that, you know, today, Tuesday's our office day. It's when you get to make those connections. We'll have that presence with purpose. We'll have our whole team meetings on those days. I think you're right. There is the value to that incidental contact in terms of being able to get the answers that you need quickly. But I think you need to balance that with the benefits of also being able to work from home. And I think that's for services to determine the most effective way to bring their teams together, but also allow people to work from home.
Thank you.
Councillor Austin?
Three very quick ones and one slightly long one. In terms of formatting the report, can I request that we have tens of thousands and less shown as tens of thousands and others of millions, just to make it more readable? Have the attribute of keep follow applied to paragraph headings, so we don't get trailing text following a heading. It's just a simple, I presume done by word, it's an attribute. And use commas in thousands when they come. So they're the easy ones, okay? Employment tribunals, page 48 and 49. Do we have a problem with the fire? It looks like we've got somewhat, shall we say, overrepresented in tables on the table on page 48 and 49. And the other thing is, when it comes down to settle, does that mean we've come to an agreement with them and potentially lost, or do we actually have a problem which we should be looking on elsewhere?
So on your points about formatting and things, noted. Good point. I think on the you're probably aware that in the fire service, the leader and the chief and deputy chief have both recently left, and so there have been some issues there, and that's being dealt with, and it's been fairly intensive level of intervention, and I'm confident that the council are providing all the support that the fire service need to get through that. So it is it's a sensitive issue, but it's being dealt with really proactively. And sorry, what was the other question?
No, that was it.
That
was it.
If I could just comment on that. I think that I spoke earlier about how single sets of issues can generate all sorts of spin-off issues. The employment tribunal cases within fire were all sprung from a single set of circumstances, which have now been resolved. I mean, and in terms of the settlement of cases, we would only do that if it was in the commercial interests of the council, and they would all the cases in particular there were settled for fairly low values. It would certainly be the case that those cases were settled for less of a value than it would have been to instruct a barrister and to take up officer time. it's always been in the best interest of the council that.
Your own question, I haven't answered, but thank you. But thank you very
And
much.
there is a requirement on the council if for anything over a sort of six-figure sum, basically, it has to come to full council. So
Thank you.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested to hear Sarah say about the managers being better equipped to identify the disciplinary cases and stuff like that. How does that match up with page 53, the appraisals? There's some really low percentage appraisals being done there. And surely, I mean, to my mind, an appraisal is to benefit both employee and employer. So if that rate was up, would that not counterbalance the disciplinaries?
logically, yes, I
Yes.
think it would. Yes, absolutely. And I think that has the I can't remember
But,
the rate of
I wonder
proposals has gone up.
What the reason is, I mean, Place and Regen's got a really low one of 37.4%.
It's the reason for that being is that those are a harder to reach workforce. I mean, generally we find engagement levels across multiple different factors is lower in those areas because they're out on site, they're rarely in the depot. You've got single managers managing big teams. It's just much harder to conduct a meaningful appraisal with those individuals. And I would also say that the way that we recorded for this time period, I mean, that situation has improved, was very much reliant upon the individual having an appraisal and then actively seeking to register in an electronic system that they'd had an appraisal. Now, obviously, their IT usage is lower than the rest of the council. Therefore, we think there may be an element of underreporting in there in terms of whether or not an individual's had an appraisal. We now conduct appraisals in Oracle, our ERP system, and that immediately counts as a completion. So we're not collecting the appraisal information, having the conversations, and recording it separately to acknowledging that an appraisal is actually
So the
taken
next time this report comes round, those figures should be
I would like to
slightly
think
more
so.
meaningful, yeah?
We're also true to say that any manager that was just not doing any appraisals would be picked up on that and questions about why.
I think this is a thing that comes in most reports for several years. So if it's changed, the reporting format, we'll look forward to seeing it in the next one.
Okay, thank you. With regards to reporting, as we progress, one of the reasons why everyone's got access to an iPad, you've only also have computers myself, we are moving to a different reporting format, and it is mentioned in the report about Power BI. And as we move forward, we get training on that, and it's more. Anyone is familiar with Power BI? Yes. So you understand the flexibilities and the possibilities of being able to go directly in to investigate more of the reports rather than just seeing graphs and figures on paper. You'll be able to see it more in real time and drill down into all of the reports, which is why it's more on computers than less on paper. That'll be in the future. From the report itself, from my perspective, thank you for explaining a bit more about the staff bank and the move to that from agency, which, as we know, was very expensive. But what we weren't going to do is not pay those costs and just say to our residents, you're not getting that service because we don't have the staff. We're building, we're adapting to that going forward. I'm pleased to see about the apprenticeships and the work experience opportunities. From being on family and children's services for so long, there was constantly the questions about what we're doing in education to move the children into real education. And for us to be able to provide those opportunities and being shown to be award winners in that area as well. But apprenticeships is not just young children, it can be at any age. And a lot of people forget that I was recently offered to go on an apprenticeship, not the best in education at my age. But the opportunities are there at any age to do an apprenticeship, and people need to remember that. We've spoken about working from home, and there's massive opportunities. The role that I have, I've got access to anything that I need working from home. It's not a case of having to get in touch with someone to say I can't get hold of that. Everything's available. And one of the things that I did want to pick up on is mentioned about we employ 5,400 people. Which is a surprise, not because of the fact that they were the biggest employer in Northumberland, but the fact that it's so much less than it used to be. It's gone down quite a bit because we're more streamlined and more efficient. And we've worked on that quite a bit. And that's what we need to do. You know, it's where we need to be. The report itself is, I'm going to say, very long, and that's not negative. It's because it's grown over the years because people have said, can we have this thing? Can we have that? Can we have that? And on the downside of that, as you've identified, it becomes more complex. So I'm happy that we've had this report today, but what I'm going to propose is that moving forward, we focus on more of parts of the report, which are then more detailed and provide more information. So instead of having this huge report on an annual basis, which takes a significant amount of time for our officers to put together, which stops them doing the work because they're too busy writing the reports and checking it and so on. We have shorter reports, but more focused on particular areas. And that'll be what we'll look at doing from this point on. If the committee's happy with that.
If I have a more focused report, can I have them more regularly then?
Yeah.
Rather than once a year, so once every quarter or something, and just focus on one or two points.
Yeah.
To see if we work with different.
Yeah, we spent an awful lot of time today going through a huge report.
Yeah.
We identified there's a few issues in there that need to be fine-tuned and improved on. But I think it would be better that we just focus on sections of it that are more relevant and go into a bit more detail with better information.
Good.
Yep.
No, you have to do that. You have to see very detailed questions, so you've obviously all read it. So.
Right, we'll move forward then. Next agenda item is item 7, best update.
Right, this is a briefer report, and I'll give an even briefer answer through this, and then ask Jan if she has any issues that she wants to sort of add or any other information. The report sort of starts off by setting out the sort of core aspect of the BEST program, and I've kind of sort of translated them on into how I see it from a sort of resident perspective. So what we're trying to do is improve service for residents. We're trying to have a happier, sort of more motivated workforce who are providing that service to residents, and we are trying to save money and deliver the services more efficiently so that we can continue providing those services to residents as well as possible. And that's an iterative process. It will never stop. But the BEST program is a really sort of key driver of some of the transformation, some of the changes that we've just heard about in the last report. So in summary, the BEST program is really all about sort of modernisation and efficiency. There's an overall target. I think there have been 2 reports that came to council. I can't remember the dates precisely, but the second one basically set out an ambition of savings of 60 million, and I think that still remains the ambition. The report today talks about some of the things that we've just been talking about in terms of ways of working, the organisation and cultural changes that are happening within the organisation, the changes to our IT systems and the rationalisation, the new CRM system that's being procured at the moment, the accountability framework that's being implemented across the council, and the changes to commissioning and procurement in line with new sort of government requirements on commissioning as well. And we'll hear more of that sort of about that in the new year. There's also, it mentions a few specifics. There's been quite a lot of work done on property review and rationalisation. So, some of the councillors that have been around a while will have noticed some services moving from one location to another, and where possible, we're trying to sort of rationalise services within our communities, so that you might have a customer service sort of front desk in a library, or other services sort of sharing buildings, and that's more efficient. It's better for residents, and I think it's really positive. But there's also opportunities to rationalise the estate and bring in capital receipts, which can part fund the capital programme, but also reduce the ongoing revenue and maintenance requirements of those buildings. And there's also potentially opportunity for sort of one-off rent regeneration, sort of revenue generation. So if we've got a piece of land that could actually be better used by the private sector to develop a supermarket or whatever, then that might be a one-off opportunity for the council to benefit. So there's a lot of work going on there to try and sort of spot those opportunities and deliver them. The report also mentions reducing agency staff, which is something we've talked about already today. There's been work done on the whole, a significant piece of work done on home to school transport to try and bring the cost of that down. It is a big cost to the council, and that work is very welcome. And that includes things like sort of encouraging independent travel and supporting independent travel, so that we can reduce sort of very expensive taxis and things like that where appropriate. And then it also talks communities first, which is a sort of an approach where, because of it, partly because of the size of our county and all of the sort of disparate communities, the approach to actually delivering some of the support services for residents, working with local organisations, and leveraging what already exists within those communities for the benefits of residents, rather than trying to deliver everything ourselves sort of remotely. We can work with people, and I think that's a really important principle. So I'll stop there and ask Jan if she has anything she would like to add. That we will bring regular updates to you on BEST, because it's a key part of the council's agenda at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Jan, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Just to say that on the benefits delivery, every quarter we provide an update as part of the financial monitoring reports that go to Cabinet. So the next one is due to go to Cabinet on the 9th of December, and that has more detail about the breakdown of where those savings are being delivered that are quoted in the report.
Okay, thanks, Jan. And this is only partway through the BEST programme as well. There are still a few years left of this programme to deliver.
Yeah, it's an ongoing programme, and in part because we want to do it and we need to do it, but also there are significant demand pressures on council services, and I think we speak to find out more about the fair funding review. That's all being analysed at the moment based on the government's announcements last Thursday. So we'll be in a position to better understand how that actually affects us as a council in terms of setting our budget for next year. So I have a sort of sneaky feeling that this BEST work will become more important than ever before.
So that's not the only thing we'll be finding out later. Councillor Bain.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. I think we all understand BEST, and in any business you'll be doing this, so we can all agree with it, and we have to find the savings and make everything more efficient. I'm in here most days, and I've talked to a lot of officers and staff members. How often do you talk to staff? One of the biggest gripes I get, and all the staff and officers realise you've got to go through this procedure, is the way it's being done, and there's a lot of unhappy people. So do you survey staff on how they feel about this? I'm talking to the people on the operators, the shop front, sometimes know better than the managers how things can work more efficiently, rather than just have a ideology that this is the way it's done. But I do get a lot of officers and staff members complaining about best. The other one is procurement. Again, I've read you sort of the paragraph there, but I would like to know a little bit more about the formula, because the cheapest isn't always the best. If you're buying something from a different part of the country, you might be saving a percentage of the cost compared to buying it locally. But buying it locally, you're probably giving employment and putting that money back into the local economy. So there must be some sort of formula that you use to decide that. Now, I would like more than just a wordy document like this. I would have liked a bit more information on that.
I'll have a stab at answering those questions, and then I'll probably need Jan to come in and help me. But on the changes to best, I mean, the way I understand it, and obviously I've been in this post since May, so I'm getting a better understanding all the time now. Is that a lot of the best work is sort of multidisciplinary. So there are teams of people working on specific aspects of best, and it's been deliberately designed in a way that the people driving it are in a sense don't have skin in the game, in the sense that they're not protecting their own area or whatever. Everyone's working collaboratively together to actually deliver the change, and people are helping each other through that process. As I understand it, there's been quite a lot of engagement at different levels in the council, including frontline staff, who, as you say, often have the best ideas because they're having to sort of deliver the services directly, and sometimes the people that design those services are not. I mean, that's just true right across the country, isn't it? Yeah. But I'll let Joanne in a second talk a little bit more about how that is happening. But what I would also say is, if you've got specific examples, please feed them through to the cabinet. We are interested in hearing that, and we all do speak to staff ourselves, of course. I was in the Hexham depot last Friday and talking to staff, and it's sort of we're very keen to understand that. On the procurement, there are some changes that have sort of happened on a sort of national level, and they're being sort of worked through. There's some work being done, there's a report coming forward. But on individual procurement projects, I think before that procurement starts, there is a requirement to sort of set out a scoring matrix on that project. And I know that a few years ago, it was probably 4 years ago, because I think I was in this post then, there was a big emphasis on increasing the sort of scoring weighting for local procurement. And I see Jan nodding, I think. So I'm sure she'll add to that. So I think it is really important. We want to try and keep as much of the Northumberland County Council pound in the Northumberland Northumberland economy as we possibly can. Obviously, that's not always possible, because sometimes there's nobody that can deliver those services locally, or sometimes we have to procure at scale where a local supplier. But where possible, we will try and do that. So Jan, is there anything you can add to sort of both of those points?
Yeah, on the first point about staff engagement and communication, yes, we have a range of mechanisms that we use. So there is a standing agenda item on corporate briefing. I brief on the latest best updates at every corporate briefing. That then gets cascaded down through teams briefings. We've done large-scale staff engagement and information events. You may recall in the summer we had one in County Hall, and I think a number of you probably attended that as well. And also we've taken the content from that event out to some of our outlying locations through a roadshow approach. We have a huge network of best ambassadors who play a key role
not only in making sure that that information is reaching the front line, but also feeding back to a staff sentiment and any issues, so that we can pick that up in our comms and our work planning. We also have regular engagement with the staff with the trade unions. So there are regular best updates to the trade unions, and that's another venue in which any concerns that are being expressed by staff can be discussed, and we'll agree how we're going to address them. So that's, you know, that's how we're approaching it. But what I would say is that you know, best represents a really significant amount of change that affects very many of our staff, some more directly than others, and change is always unsettling. So, you know, it is something that we need to keep a close eye on, but to a degree, you know, it's inevitable that there will be people who complain about best. You know, what we try to do is where those concerns, you know, are expressed, to either to address them if they're things that we can address, or to at least have an engagement so that staff understand why we're making these changes. On the second point about procurement, yes, you're quite right. The new Procurement Act came into effect in February. It's very unfortunate that the act came into effect before we had all of the guidance about how to apply it. So it's taken the procurement team some time to work through it. But one of the key features of that new Procurement Act is that it does give greater opportunities and rights to local suppliers to bid for council contracts. We've had a number of, and we do this on a regular basis, engagement events with local suppliers so that they know how to bid for council contracts. You know, we publish all of our contract opportunities as we're required to do. We now have, we already report performance in terms of the proportion of our procurement spend, which is going to local suppliers. We do that on a regular basis, and there is a whole host of new metrics that we're now required to publish on the website. I think we were probably already complying with that for the most part anyway, because we've tried to adopt a very transparent approach. But at the end of the day, there are requirements on us in terms of compliance, in terms of making sure that all bidders have a level playing field, and the council has an overriding duty of to achieve value for money. So it's always a careful balancing act. But Councillor Oliver's quite right. Before we publish any tender opportunity, we have to set out the evaluation criteria, and where possible, we build in a weighting for social value, whatever form that might take. And where we are able to award business to local suppliers, we do so. But it's a very highly regulated, you know, area, and we do have to stay within the limits of the law. So that does mean that we can't, you know, always favour local suppliers just in the interests of fairness and compliance. I think it's a good story to tell, Councillor Bainan, in terms of the proportion of our spend that does go to local suppliers compared to many other councils, but we're always looking to do more in that direction.
Thanks, Jan. Councillor Dunn next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on the communities first bit, the very last paragraph. Can we have some sort of report back about the 15 awards given and what they covered and that sort of thing? Because it's great to hear that 15 awards were given in the first round, totaling 50k. But I'd be interested to see where they went to and what they were for and that sort of thing. So if that could come round, councillors, that would be good.
Yeah.
Secondly, I've got to echo Councillor Bainan when he was on about the staffing side of things, because one of the key outcomes of BEST is enhanced staff experiences. And when you look at the key performance indicator table on page 56, I know I've gone back into the other report, it doesn't seem to hold that up at the minute, you know. Yeah, so that worries me a bit, and it's something I think we'll recognise that it's inevitable that there is some sort of unsettled time, but it's something that we need to keep a grip of. And that sort of report would be something that I would welcome on a more regular basis, because it's really important that there's a handle on that.
Okay, well, on both those points, I mean, first of all, yes, we can get you details of the 15 awards made, and we'll circulate that. So, and on the second point, around the staffing, perhaps I maybe so bold to suggest that it might be one of the things that you as a committee request if we're going to move towards a more specific but more regular reporting regime rather than a one-off annual
Yes, because it's
report.
not waiting.
That could be one of the areas that
Next year.
you ask us to come back in 6 months or
Yes.
and report on and give you an update. And I mean, as Jan said, obviously during a period of change there will be some unsettlement, but I think it's really important that we do everything we can for the staff, not least because, as I said at the beginning, 80% of them are also Northumberland residents, and so that's over 4,000 people, and that's really key. So yeah, absolutely on board with that.
Yeah. Chair, if I may, I'm happy to have a discussion with Sarah Farrell following this meeting about what we can do to capture that staff sentiment around BEST on a more systematic basis, so it can be reported back here. Because I do think it's very difficult when it's anecdotal. So I'll discuss with Sarah what we can do in terms of getting you some more detailed information about that, and whether we need to do more in terms of our staff surveys specifically around BEST, so we can capture that, as I say, in a more structured and systematic way.
Great, thanks, Jan. We have a staff survey. We are normally get the staff survey out just when the events appear right or something like that. Councillor Nicholson next, please.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the home to school transport on page 95. You know, I am in favour, of making these savings that we have been on this home to school transport. However, I do have some grave concerns in particular case with when it comes to the send side of it, because how do we catch the young people or children that are still in the process of having the ACHP finalised, or because I'm guessing, or I'm from where I've read somewhere, when transport is allocated to children with SEND, then it's to be in accordance with the ACHPs. But I do have a personal case, in my ward, where that AHCP has gone over and over, not being done, and the transport side has, in their view, has let them down seriously because that AHCP hasn't been done. So what are we doing within all of the training to catch those cases?
I think on the so just picking up the root cause of that problem is probably not a transport problem. It's a sort of policy problem, and it's an issue around an individual. And obviously, I can't comment on the individual case because I don't know it, and it wouldn't be appropriate to anyway. But I am aware that demand for EHCP assessments has rocketed. I think it's gone up by 92% in the last 2 years. I think that don't treat those figures as gospel, but it's in that order, and there is, so one of the things the council is doing at the moment is trying to recruit more occupational psychologists to help carry out those EHCPs. We're also waiting on the government white paper on SEND as well, and so we're with bated breath because the demand on this authority and every other authority in the land is really significant, and it's probably at some point going to require some national policy change in terms of how each EHCP plans are determined and what is included, and that's going to be a very difficult political discussion for whoever makes it. But at a council level, we're trying to get them done as quickly as possible. If there's a specific issue with a particular case, then obviously you have to raise that with the team, and you could go to the cabinet member or to or directly to officers or through the sort of normal members' feedback systems. I don't think we'll ever be in a position where we could actually shortcut that process in terms of offering the transport until the and that may be not what you want to hear, but there has to be a system and a process, and you can't really start offering somebody the transport until the EHCP need is determined, because that just wouldn't be fair and it wouldn't be manageable, and it could put the council in a sort of very difficult financial situation, and who would determine at what point that person becomes eligible for a more specific form of transport than otherwise they might be. And so I think the best way to deal with that is to try and get the EHCP plan dealt with as quickly as possible. And if you're struggling with that, I would recommend dropping Guy a note, and Guy Ryan Thompson a note, and seeing if he can help with it.
But going back to generalization,
Yeah.
There are many out there that probably haven't brought their case to a councillor. Yeah. So my question is, in the transport department, they will have a system where if that person who requires the transport has SEND needs, they would then have to check out their EHCP report. What is in place for these people? What would that person working in that transport department do if they went to check out that report and that report has something highlighted on it, like it's currently being reviewed or it's not finished, completed? What is the next step of the transport?
I think the next step is to try and sort out.
How are we catching them?
Yeah, I understand that, but I think the next step is to try and sort out the EHCP plan that's outstanding, because I just can't. I mean, Jan might want to come in and comment on this, but I can't see a situation where the transport team would be able to override, because they're just not qualified to do it, and their primary purpose is to deliver the transport needs of all the people who use the capital transport.
But in the meantime, that person.
I know. So what we have to try and deal with is the actual EHCP plan. And then that will trigger the transport, the supply of the transport, or the meeting of the transport need. And I just can't see a logical way that you could circumvent that that would be fair and that wouldn't put the council into a fairly invidious position. So I think the key thing is just let's deal with the root cause of that problem wherever it occurs.
There's been a number of SEND and transport reports go to the Family and Children's Services scrutiny, but by all means drop Councillor Daly, the chair of FACS, an email, and he can provide further information on that. And he's happy to solve it. As Councillor Oliver said, it's not just an issue in Northumberland, it's a national issue, and these problems of getting EHCPs through, that's not a budgetary problem. We've provided the budget and sorted all that out. It's just down those individual channels. I've seen copies of EHCPs where people are trying to get them through. I've seen a couple where they've come through from other authorities into Northumberland, and you look at them and you think, I'm not surprised this hasn't gone through. It's so minimalistic and basic, and it's just hit a stumbling block because the information isn't there. And I'm not saying that's every case, but it's nothing from a budgetary point of view that we could fix. But please get in touch with Councillor Daly, and he'll happily forward you some information and discuss matters. Got Councillor Taylor next.
Advance Northumberland,
Yes.
arm's length body, have they embraced the best?
Jan will help me out on this. My understanding is that they are not because they're an arm's length body, they are responsible. The directors of Advance are responsible for running Advance. So we would expect, as the shareholder, for them to be running their organisation as efficiently as possible. So they would be dealing with their own best on an ongoing basis. They would basically that's the responsibility of the people running that company. Where there has been, and I'm very keen to encourage more dialogue between the council and Advance, is around helping us to deliver as a council some of the things. So we just talked about the property review, for example. There may be opportunities where so one of the things Advance are doing are biodiversity net gain sites. There may be council land that Advance or any other private sector organisation could acquire from the council that we are not using in any meaningful way to provide biodiversity net gain offset sites. That would be a win-win potentially if Advance was a successful bidder for a piece of land, and we would be encouraging Advance to get involved and work with the council to sort of deliver those efficiencies. So that would be Advance helping the council with best, as opposed to the council helping Advance
But
with
aren't
its
they
own best.
getting the funds for any of those? Those funds aren't coming back into the council.
No, if Advance bought a piece of land from the council, the money would come to the council. But it may be
But are
the
they
money
buying
would come from the council to buy it.
Are they buying the ground? Are
Yeah.
we transferring the ground free of charge?
We haven't, so the Potland Burn site, for example, I think, I can't remember exactly where that is now in terms of the actual transaction. But the deal there is that they will buy the site and then will develop.
The only reason why I'm asking is that the council as a whole have made a significant financial input in Advance.
Yes.
We have.
Yeah.
And it's significant.
It is significant. Yeah.
And if the council as a whole, we're looking at our property holdings, our head count, and we're making real savings.
Yes.
But yet we're still sending money out.
Yeah.
And if they can't demonstrate that the money that we're giving them is not going towards them using the best that they can and significant savings within them, then that will save us money.
Yes, and I absolutely support what you're saying there. It's really, really important that happens because, so if we take two examples, one is Manor Walks and the site opposite Manor Walks, and I'm not going to go back into time and talk about whether or not that should have happened. But what we've got now is a situation where Advance own that site, and Advance have we are as a council encouraging Advance to make the most of that site commercially. Its value has fallen, but there would be ways that the value could be increased in the future, and I think that's really important. So that is a clear objective in Advance's business plan, is to make the most of that site. Another example would be Advance's role in the NEP1, NEP2, NEP3 development, and this massive project that's coming in with QTS Blackstone and the data center and all of the potential spin-off around that, and all of the works and the JDR site at Camas as well. And so I think that's really important. So, but what I can assure you is that whenever a transaction happens, and that involves the council providing some funding for it, there is a really, really rigorous process now for making sure that all stacks up. So if you put it into use the analogy of an individual household and its mortgage, we're no longer into the realms of 120% or more mortgages. We're into and there were really detailed affordability checks and the criteria and the business plans that justify that council funding. That council lending actually is really tight, and we will continue to make sure that that's absolutely the case. But I think Advance is in really good shape. They're doing some really important work, both economically and socially.
You may have seen in your papers, Councillor Taylor, that page 101, we've got Advance coming into this committee early next year.
I will
Chair,
to them coming in.
Yes, Jen.
Chair, can I just add something? Where we dispose of land to Advance Northumberland, we have to comply with section 123 of the Local Government Act, which requires us to dispose at best consideration. So we don't do sweetheart deals with Advance. They pay the prevailing market price for any land that they acquire from us. They have their own corporate efficiency programme. It's part of their business plan. It's not exactly the same as Best because they have different opportunities, but that is part of the review of the business plan by the shareholder, that, we seek assurance that they are making efficiencies so that they're delivering best value for money. And then as Councillor Oliver has outlined, the key touch point with the Best programme is around the land and property review. and we are having those ongoing discussions about where there might be sort of joint opportunities, but we do not give money to Advance Northumberland. Where there is a business case and we're satisfied, that they can afford to repay it, and that the council has adequate security in the form of an asset over which we can take a charge, we will lend to enable them to invest, but we do not give money to Advance Northumberland, nor other than in very specific cases where we're giving grants which are subject to subsidy control requirements and other regulatory requirements, nor to the best of my knowledge have we ever done that. So all of Advance's assets have been financed through council borrowing, and the expectation is that they will repay that borrowing, and members will be aware that was one of the put them in a better position to be able to start paying down council debt, was one of the main drivers behind the financial restructuring that was agreed by council in March. So we do keep a really close eye on all of this through the shareholder committee.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Okay. Councillor Nicholson first.
This one is for Jan. Have you got any future borrowing for lending to Advance? Have you changed the structure of how much percentage you lend out to over and above the PWLB rates, so that we don't end up in a soft loan position like we have got, still on our books?
Yes, we don't offer them soft loans. They're all at a commercial rate, and that is required in order to demonstrate subsidy control compliance. And we also have an upper limit on the loan to value ratio, 70%. So we won't lend more than 70% of the underlying assets, as a commercial lender would do.
Yeah, so just to go back to my question, sorry, I mustn't have worded it correctly. When the soft loans that we currently have on our books at the moment with Advance didn't start off as soft loans. They were lent out, as you say, on a PWLB rate plus 1%, 2%, I'm not sure. Because of the market price, the interest rates going up to a level that nobody in the market expected to, they then became soft loans. So those loans are currently costing us money. So going forward, when we lend money to Advance, have we made an adjustment of the percentage on top of the PWLB rates to ensure that it doesn't become another soft loan?
Well, can I
Okay,
just-
we do not lend on that basis. We don't structure interest rates on that basis. The interest rate that is offered is based on advice from our external advisors about what the prevailing commercial rate is that any commercial lender would offer, and factored into that is a risk assessment. So in the past, loans may have been provided on a different basis, but that's how we do it now. And you're right, we do have a few loans that would be categorised as soft, but they're legacy loans, and we don't offer the lending on that basis anymore.
If I could just add a couple of points to that, those legacy soft loans are, in the grand scheme of things, very tiny amounts. So the larger external lending from the council, the number of organisations, Advanced Northumberland being the biggest one, but also the Northumbria Health Trust, and I think Newcastle Airport as well. And those loans they're not soft loans, and they are, the rates that were set at the time were a margin on the prevailing PWLB rates at the time, and those loans are effectively, in a sense, Jan probably wouldn't see it like this because it's not the way the accounts work, but in a sense they're subsidising the rest of the council's borrowing. So I think 70% of the interest costs of all of the council's borrowing is covered by the revenue from those external loans. And we have the lowest average aggregate interest rate of any of the North East authorities, in some cases by quite some margin. So treasury management here, Northumberland has a very, very strong history of very prudent treasury management, and we're well within our authorised borrowing limits and prudential indicators on borrowing, and so I think it's a tight ship.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, I'm not sure whether I've fully explained this. If I can just clarify a bit more. So in the past, some loans have been given to offered to Advanced Northumberland on the basis of a percentage added to the prevailing PWLB rate. We no longer do that. So, the rate at which we can borrow is no longer material. So if we could borrow at 4% and add on a 2% markup, theoretically we could lend at 6%. But if no other commercial provider was willing to lend at anything less than 9%, that would be the rate at which we would offer that loan to Advance. Plus, within the rate that we offer, there would also be a risk margin. So we, as I said, in the past, some loans have been offered at just a markup to the PWLB rate, but that's no longer the case. So I just want to make sure that the committee are clear about that.
Well, Northumberland County Council is no longer a bank that likes to say yes.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. That's the bank that likes to say we'll cancel your debt. Jan, three bits. Just overview really the best finance and value for money. We set it up with 3-year agreed costs, which is now, I think this is the last year, isn't it? Onto this.
No,
So,
because
what I want
sorry.
to ask is, my interpretation at the time was we put that £9 million in over 3 years. We formed the best, and then we pushed it out as an ingrained policy within the council. So it shouldn't actually cost money now. It should be ingrained within the council's operating procedures. So it shouldn't be costing any money now. Is that the position we're in? And I would just like to make a comment that, it's got a £60 million savings achieved incrementally. up to 2029. That's quite a jump from where we are, and I realise these things might compound themselves as we go forward. But when we set it up, we said 17 to 34 savings annually. We're coming in at, looks to be 8 after 3 years. Are we still on those sort of figures that we came out with when we started this thing? So A, is it still costing us money? And B, are we on track with the figures that we started with?
Right, so we had the original business case in 2022. We developed that business case. And that's where the original 9 million figure came from in terms of the investment, 3 million a year for 3 years. We subsequently, so we did a huge amount of work, discovery work, design work, etc. We came back in January of this year with a revised strategic business case based on all of that work that we'd done, which set a much more ambitious target. And that's where the £60 million figure came from. So the original proposal was based on, or the original investment was based on achieving the lower end of the original business case savings, I think 16.9 million. We then came back with a much more ambitious programme to deliver £60 million of benefits by the end of 28/9. So hugely increased scope of the programme and ambition of the programme, but also we pushed the timeline out and said this is going to, this is not about what you can deliver in the next 2 or 3 years, but it's about what you can deliver over a 5 to 6 year period it would have taken us to. So that was the enhanced business case version 2.0 that was agreed by Cabinet in spring of this year. I think it was March it was agreed. And in the budget that was set in February, funding for that more ambitious programme was agreed by council. So you had some initial funding that had been delivered and that had been agreed, and then you had some more funding that was agreed, transformation funding that was agreed in February. In terms of where we are now, you will see in this report in front of you, it says that by the end of 25/6, we will have delivered £18 million worth of savings. Some of those savings are recurrent. Some of them are one-off. What we're currently doing is refreshing all of the numbers to go into the medium-term financial plan that will come to council for approval in February, because all of the numbers that are in the current MTFP are based on the original business case. There wasn't time to update the MTFP for the new business case because of the timing of it just wasn't right. But that's what we're going to do. And what we're doing as part of that is we will be setting out what the recurrent savings are and how they build up year by year. So we achieved recurrent savings in 24/5. We achieved more recurrent savings in 25/6, or we're on course to do that. And we will continue to achieve more recurrent savings in 26/7, 27/8 and 28/9. So it builds up to that £60 million figure. We are currently on track to achieve £60 million of benefit by the end of 28/9. I can't tell you at this particular point in time exactly whether what we've, whether we've hit the payback, but I think we're there or thereabouts, which I think is basically the question that you're asking. Are the savings that we've achieved today equal to or greater than the amount we've spent today? We will continue to spend, but we're at the tipping point now where the benefits start to, we start to generate net savings, and they will build up very quickly from this, excuse me, from this point onwards. I can't give you all the detail of that right here and now, Malcolm, but you know, it will be coming as part of the budget proposals that we bring to this committee in February and to council.
I look forward to the reports you talked about there, Jan. If we can move on to procurement, and you know what John was saying about procurement, the council did an exercise with the government, and it was called LM3 because it found that the pounds spent by this council outside the area was worth 1.2 pounds, and within the area was worth 3. So, you know, we really need to be taking account of that. But my question is, do we still use preferred supplier lists for procurement?
No,
But
no,
that's
we have open tenders. Anyone can bid.
right. Good. Property. You brought 3 property disposals to us last year. You brought 3 this year. I'm just wondering, I had this discussion before and you said it wasn't about selling them, it was about getting rid of the overhead costs on them. So I presume they were going to be mothballed or whatever you want to call it. I'm just wondering if any have been sold, and when you talked about the land and whatnot, have we sold any of that? And don't go on to Potland Burn because I could be all day with that. I think that's absolutely crazy.
So we, in terms of those buildings that we've exited now, a range of different destinations. So Foundry House is being redeveloped for an added care facility for adults. Compass House, I think we are currently negotiating the sale of that. Blythe Civic Centre, we've had an alternative proposal for use of that building come forward, and I'm not sure about Northumbria House. But where there isn't an alternative council proposal to use those buildings for an alternative use, the intention is that they will be marketed.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right, we all done on that one? Good questions on that. Thank you, Nick and Jan. We'll move on to item 8, which is the corporate services and economic growth overview and scrutiny committee works program and monitoring report.
Not really much to add, Chair. Just obviously we talked about going next week. Just on the terms of reference school, I have updated those from the council meeting. I think what those actually do is it clarifies in field the issues that fall within the remit of this committee. I think it's much easier to understand. I think it refreshes the language as well. But nothing to add to that, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Item 9.
Yeah, can I ask a question on this one?
Me too.
How do we ask for something to be put on the work programme? For instance, I'd like to formally request the mayor is asked to come here. I was doing up the leader that way you could drag anybody in.
We can't force them.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. It's just semantics.
It would have to fall, yeah, exactly. It would have to fall in the remit. You could make a request, and then we would take, or you would take Chair's group.
Communities in Place had the transport person at the mayoral authority. It wasn't actually the mayor herself, but they came last year and did a presentation on the Necker transport plan.
Yes.
Well, you know how many times it's been mentioned recently about how important the relationship is financially, strategically, and all that. We need to understand that, how it's impacting the council.
Yeah.
Under what? Or what in which? You can't just asked for the mayor to come along, it's under what part of the?
Well,
the
what, I mean, you know as well as I do that how we were sold the mayoral appointment before it actually came into place. Now, I would like to look at how it's impacted on NCC, not just financially, but strategically as well, I suppose. Set against what we were promised. I'd like to measure that difference, and hopefully it's on the plus side rather than the negative side. I can only see the negative side. You see that's the problem I've got. We were promised certain things which haven't transpired.
If you can detail it out. And
That's all I'm asking. I'm just asking if we can request the mayor to come and answer for her position with regards to Northumberland. That would have been before. I've questioned them before.
But that scrutiny,
No.
will be a different floor from council members.
not sure it falls into scrutiny. Maybe full council, but I'm not sure how it would fall into this scrutiny committee. Under the terms.
Who's going to examine that relationship? Who's going to examine the benefits or the detriments to that relationship then if we don't?
Because under the mayor, there's certain responsibilities. So Glenn has a portfolio.
And Glenn's a cabinet member on the mayoral authority.
Yeah.
Each council leader is. I mean, you could ask the question, and I think you'd have to phrase it in a slightly different way. We want you to come and account for yourself. But, she might politely decline that. But if you actually set out a very specific request that sort of said we want to understand how the Northumberland County Council can work with the mayoral authority to develop the economic agenda in Northumberland or something along those lines, or how that's already happening, then Kim May would be very well predisposed to engage with us. I don't know.
I'll try and say and put something in writing, and we'll discuss it in Chair's group.
I might be a bit too direct for you, as Councillor Oliver suggested.
Not throwing an email on it. Councillor Dunn, did you have it?
Yes, as much as Malcolm didn't want to mention Potland Burn, I'm going to have to. I think I did request a report a couple of months ago, Sean, so just wondering when that's going to.
And when I spoke to colleagues at Advance, they suggested that we come to perhaps the January meeting, which of course we don't have because it's going to February the budget. As they come in March anyway, it was felt that perhaps if you agree that
As long as I know it's not propped off the agenda sort of thing. And the only other question I had was the council tax scheme. Does that come to scrutiny at all? And if not, why not? I know the consultations ended on the 26th of November.
Yes.
So is it not something that this committee would be looking at the consultation as opposed to what were the results of that consultation? Did anybody put any in for a start? And, do we get to scrutinise that scheme? Not the whole thing where there was the options, but the one that was the preferred option.
You get to vote on it in January, I think.
Yeah, but we're not
but if you want to do some pre-scrutiny, I can't remember. Is that automatic or no?
We had pre-scrutiny 3 or 4 years ago. We used to take the report and the basis. But since we stopped doing pre-scrutiny, it's been part of the budget process.
Yeah. So you could do it two ways, because obviously ultimately am I right, Jan, in saying that it gets agreed by council in January so that it can be built into the budget in February?
Correct. There will be a report going to December cabinet.
Yeah, and that report is currently being.
Yes, and the consultation I think has just closed. I think it was on Friday it closed. So that report is just currently being finalised. So it will go to cabinet in December. It will come to council in January. So there is not. If you wanted to have a review of that, you'd have to have an extraordinary meeting in January. That would be the only opportunity to do it. If you didn't, yeah, because by the time you have your February meeting where you're talking about the budget, the decision will already have been taken.
Yeah.
It does have its separate vote at full council, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it does. So
January.
the issue is whether you want it to come here
That's
before
no
it goes to council.
Yeah, that's.
So that's another decision with no scrutiny that is
Just
going
have to have a special meeting.
It's
Well, you
just,
could argue that the council meeting itself is scrutiny because you debate
Yes.
the.
oh, not the way the chair holds the
Well-
meeting these days.
That's a different matter. Let me take that up directly with him.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying if you wanted to scrutinise it, you'd have to arrange a meeting in January.
I've already complained about seeing council policies in the press before we get any notification. And that was the one I mentioned.
I mean, there's been no, we've been very transparent about the whole process, and there was, well, I sat in a group leaders meeting where the group leaders were briefed by, well, primarily by me, but Glenn and I sat with them and explained it all to them. I think there's been, so, and then obviously the consultation is a public consultation, so by very nature, that's public. And then obviously the reports will come forward. So Cabinet will be asked in December to agree to it going forward as a proposal for January. And then in January, the whole council will get to vote on it for inclusion in the February budget. So I would argue that we're being as open as we possibly can about that. But if you wanted to have scrutiny in January, I mean, I'd be happy to.
The full information I've got off
Yeah.
the Northumberland Gazette.
Yeah, but you'll get a report. The report will be on the council website ahead of the cabinet meeting.
So are you saying that when this report goes back to cabinet on the 9th,
Yeah.
we all look at it on the 9th and decide, well, we would like to scrutinise it in this committee, then we've got time enough to do it before the
Yeah,
January.
as John said, you'd have to organise an extraordinary meeting in January, but
15th of January.
Yeah. Or you could formally call it in, is the other option that you have. I'm not saying I'm encouraging you to do that, but just that you have the right to call it in after Cabinet have made the decision.
Cabinet are only making a decision to take it forward for full council, aren't we? So we're not actually
Well,
making.
Indeed, and that's why calling is probably not the appropriate way to do it. But if you wanted to, to, like I say, to have an extra scrutiny committee in January, then you could do it then. And Councillor Dunn, if you want more information about Potland Burn, if you were going to have an additional meeting in January, we could schedule that report as well. Otherwise, my suggestion would be that is part of what comes to you in March when Advance are due to come to this committee to talk about their business plan and performance.
Can I suggest that would make it biodiversity net gain rather than Potland Burn, Sean?
Yep.
And the Advance thing, if we're leaving it up to Advance to answer, then we need a senior figure from planning or certainly somebody from the council to be sitting next to them, because this is a two-way thing fraught with moral difficulties, I would say.
Sorry, so you're saying you want a report on biodiversity net gain more generally? Because I'm not sure this is the right scrutiny committee for that to come to. If you want a planning perspective and an environment perspective.
No, I'm looking for a financial perspective, John.
Oh, okay.
I think we're
done. I'm just wondering why. Oh, sorry. I'm wondering why you suggested you want planning officers here for that discussion. Sorry, Malcolm, I might not have understood.
The way it works, so we understand the way it works.
Oh, okay.
Planning couldn't answer financial questions.
No, but they can explain how it works, like how we can. Let's not go there. Let's not spoil the show.
So get back to the question of council tax, because it's going to cabinet and then it's going to full council, and we have the budget scrutiny in February.
So I think it's also going to the audit committee this week, council tax, to review and evaluate the design, implementation, effectiveness of the organisation's arrangements for managing the council tax system.
Which month is that?
That this week, this coming week.
That's not the same. That's not the same issue. This is specifically the council tax support scheme, not the administration of council tax.
Wider precept and so on, yeah.
We wouldn't be able to fit the scrutiny in between cabinet and full council, so it would be after full council.
There's no point in saying it's after.
So the vote to be before full council.
I'd have thought, Chair, that a minority administration would want as much information put out to all members
We will be,
so they can garner support for any changes that they might be proposed.
hence the group leader briefings, hence there'll be full transparency on all of this. There has to be legally, I mean, apart from anything else. And if you want scrutiny in January, we'll be more than happy to come along and have it scrutinised. So this is something, we can't be more open than a public consultation. Everybody in the county has had the opportunity to respond, and so we're very happy to do that.
I mean, I don't have a problem by the looks of it.
Yeah,
It's just the way it's been done again.
I mean, far be it from me to disagree with you, Mark, but I can't see how there could possibly be any legitimate accusation that we have done this secretly. We've shared it broadly. We've done a public consultation. We're bringing a public report to a public cabinet meeting. We're taking a public report to a public council meeting in January. The full council will be making the ultimate decision about whether it proceeds. So I don't really see what more we could have done than that in terms of sharing it. And if you want scrutiny, apart from having it scrutinised in January, very happy to do that.
I'll just make the point that secretly was your object. It wasn't mine.
Yeah.
Chair, can I also float another idea, which is, if what members are asking for is the opportunity to have a much more detailed briefing, and ask questions before it gets to council so that they understand the proposal in much more detail ahead of that council vote. The alternative to arranging another meeting of this committee would be for us to put an all-member briefing session on in January ahead of the council meeting, where members have the opportunity to ask all of those questions. So that's just another option for you to consider.
I think that might be a more suitable option. Then it's not just this committee, it's an all-member. Whoever wants to.
The new councillors.
Yeah.
So
that's a good
would be
idea.
helpful.
Because we could have, because otherwise we could end up with a situation where audit committee want to do it as well as this committee, and arguably communities in place might have an interest in it as well. So it's sort of, I think that would be that's a very good solution.
I think that's a better solution. Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
Chair,
we'll arrange that.
Chair, would that not be a good meeting to get the mayor here?
It would. It definitely would.
I've got no items of urgent business. I would have normally said I'll see you in the new year when we have a budget meeting, but we've got a call in next week and an extraordinary meeting, and you will be receiving information.
Yeah, the papers probably go tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah. So good. Other than that, thank you for coming today. Any questions?
Good meeting.
Or if you go to the session this afternoon, I'll see you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
She was one of those ladies.
Oh, no, no.
I was wondering about, they know they're giving you, told me to, so